What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Best Women's Boxing Show, period. We have a special one for you today, but first of all, I'm Cynthia and my beautiful co-host.
And I'm Jeandra LaBeouf, and this is an honor, a pleasure, and long overdue to speak with this guest that we have today, Miss Jackie Kallen.
Yay! Welcome to the show.
Guys.
Hi.
I'm so happy to be here. It's an honor to be on your show. You're both amazing. And so for me to be part of it is pretty exciting.
It is really an honor. And I think that people newer fans to the sport don't fully understand and appreciate what you have contributed to the sport. So I hope we can touch a little bit upon that today when we speak with you. So thank you again for joining us.
Well, that's because I'm an OG, girls. I've been around a long time. So, when you've been in any business or sport or any, career choice for a long time, there's people that come along after you and they don't necessarily know who you are. So this is a great opportunity for me to reach some of the younger boxing fans.
Well, for the fans and people that are tuning in that don't recognize her, Miss Jackie Kallen is literally the first lady of boxing. And let me let your little titles. First female boxing manager, best-selling author, a trailblazer, an actress, a philanthropist, a mentor, an international speaker, a motivational speaker, and congratulations on being newly inducted or soon to be newly inducted in the International Boxing Hall of Fame class of 2024.
Incredible.
Thank you. That's an honor. I really kind of look at that as the pinnacle to get in the Hall of Fame. Shows that you've done something right and that, you're the top of what you're doing. And being the first female manager ever inducted in the Hall of Fame, it's for me, it bodes well for all of you women that are in our sport, because I have to say that in 1978, when I got involved in boxing, there were none of us, no females. It was an all-male sport. There just weren't any women. The only woman there were two that I knew of, Eileen Eaton, who had been a promoter in LA at the Olympic Auditorium for years. She was a promoter and before my time. And then there was a female trainer named Becky O'Neill that worked with a fighter named Jeff Chandler, also back in the 70s. I remember her getting up in the corner with her fighter. But other than that, there were no females. And now look at us. There's lots of us. Or I don't know if lots is the word, but there are many of us, and it's wonderful to see.
Absolutely. Before we dive into your marvelous career, I mean, we could talk for hours. We're going to try to scratch just the tip of the iceberg, but something we speak a lot here. Cynthia and I are both mothers. We're both raising children. Cynthia has a young baby. I have a child in college, and Cynthia has a boy. I have a girl. You have two boys. Working in a male-driven industry, how do you think some of that shaped the way you parented your two boys? You have two boys and 5 grandchildren. So that's amazing. How do you think working in this industry kind of even shaped or enhanced how you parented your sons?
Well, I think it had a profound influence. My sons were both 7 and 8 at the time I got into boxing. So they were able to go to training camp with Tommy Hearns, because I was working with Tommy in the Kronk Gym from the time that they were 7 and 8 until they were, out of high school. So they had many opportunities to go to the different training camps, to travel to Vegas, to France, all over with the fighters. So they developed a strong camaraderie with people from all different backgrounds that they might not have had in our community if they had just gone to high school and in elementary school with their friends. They wouldn't have had the experiences they had. Plus, they got to see a strong female. That was a good role model for them. If their mother could go into an industry like this and be successful, it showed them the power of women, and the respect that they had for their mother went into future relationships with other women. They learned to respect women and admire their accomplishments, and they never were chauvinistic or had that attitude that boys are better than girls. They had none of that. They were always very open-minded. So I think that it was very beneficial to them. And of course, my grandkids, they grew up with this as their legacy. My little grandson, my youngest one, he's 11, and he goes to title boxing, and he's done a lot of things, in his own little way. And he loves Uncle Tommy, and, enjoys every second he gets to spend with him. So I think that through the generations, it's been extremely beneficial in our whole family. And I think it also showed them all different kinds of people, that you can get along with all different kinds of people. So it's been, I think, wonderful.
I think what's so fascinating is when I first started reading about you, because I've always known about you, and I got that crash course when the movie Against the Ropes that starred Meg Ryan. And so it was kind of, it was inspired by your life, but you weren't always in boxing. You actually were a show journalist, I believe, and you interviewed Tommy Hearns, and you just kind of became kind of fascinating. How do you go from being a show journalist, writing about, actors or, singers and dancers? What was it about Tommy, and what was it about boxing that sparked your interest, that I want to make the jump into this crazy career?
Really kind of an interesting jump, because I've been covering the Oscars, the Emmys, and interviewing, Michael Jackson and Elvis and the Rolling Stones, and a lot of very big names, including presidents and all kinds of sports athletes. And then in the mid 70s, our paper was short a sports writer, and they said, we need you to go out and cover this baseball player. And I went, okay, I grew up with, only a brother. My dad was one of 3 brothers. I was married to a guy that was one of 4 brothers, and I had 2 sons. So I was pretty submerged in sports and, male dominated things. So it wasn't a big stretch for me. I wasn't strictly a little girly girl that played with, dolls. So for me, it wasn't that big a stretch to go do a sports story. And after that, then I started covering football and basketball and hockey. And along came this assignment to interview this young boxer, Thomas Hitman Hearns. And he was just starting out here in Detroit. And I'd never been to a live boxing show. And unlike the other sports, which I love them all, boxing, somehow it just caught my imagination and my passion. And I went, oh my gosh, because I couldn't believe that these 2 guys were so, in the ring, Tommy was like, he looked like the devil. He was so intense. And then afterwards, he was like, hello, this little sweet, timid voice. I went, that can't be the same guy. I just saw him rip this guy's head off. And now he's like this sweet, humble little thing. How do you turn that switch? So I wanted to know more about that. How do you psychologically get in the ring with that attitude of destruction, and then climb through those ropes, and you're back to being this sweet, wonderful person? How do you do that? So I got fascinated with that aspect of the sport. And then as I got more immersed in it, and I'm sure both of you know, being involved in boxing, there's so many different sides to it. And then I learned how to wrap hands and stop cuts, and how to pick opponents, and what to look for in a fighter, and so many other things that became part of my reality, that I just kind of phased into boxing and never left. And it's been 45 years. So obviously I love it. Obviously 45 years later, I love it.
What's so critical, I think about, I read Blood Brothers recently, and they talked about the, storytelling with the fighters. There's no internet, there's none of these things. And a lot of people at that time, when he was coming up, Tommy Hearns, thought, everything was so barbaric. And you had a unique perspective as a journalist to kind of bring this story, to bring him to people in a way that they wouldn't understand outside the rope. What's the critical part of storytelling for fighters and people like that at that time, in an era when people thought the sport was just so barbaric? Like how hard was it to sort of humanize them for people, and to see them as people and not just barbarians?
That's a great point. No one's ever asked that. And I think that's so important, because I didn't cover the sport as basically a sports writer. It wasn't like in the first round he did this, and then in the 3rd round. It was more like, who is this person, and what motivates him? Where does his hunger come from? What's his background? And the fact that they don't get in there to hurt each other. Yes, they do for the sake of winning, but they each hug at the end and they show mutual respect. And a lot of the fighters that I got to know wrote poetry and wrote all kinds of beautiful letters and things to, their loved ones. And they had the strangest interests. One of them raised, flowers, had a beautiful garden. And I went, this boxer has a garden. I mean, where does that come from? And they had hobbies and interests that were very far apart from violence and fighting. So I was able to see that human side, as you said, to humanize these fighters. They're not gladiators that are getting in there looking for blood. This is a career choice. Like a golfer goes out and hits the ball because he loves golf. Fighters get in there and fight because they love the contact, they love the challenge, they love the competitiveness. So I think that when you show that side of an athlete, that they're not there to hurt somebody, although it's a hurting game, like MMA and like bare knuckle and like a lot of the different sports. Mostly every fighter I've ever met was a gentleman and saw it as a sport and gave the utmost respect to their opponent before and after. There are a lot of smack talk goes on before, but at the end of the day, there was that love and respect, like we're in this together and I don't want to hurt you any more than I have to get the win. So I hope to do more of a publicity campaign that was a crossover, not just to the sports fans, but so the mothers and the women that saw this sport as barbaric would see it as a competitive, almost a poetic ballet. I always called it like a violent ballet. There's so much strategy. Look at these fighters as smart people. They have to outthink their opponent. It's not just brute strength. So I tried to put a different look to the sport.
When you say violent ballet, we say poetry in motion. It's, it's a chess game, but at the end of the day, they end up hitting each other in the face. But there was you mentioned something that you learned how to stop cuts and wrap hands. Kronk Gym, famous Kronk Gym in Michigan, the famous Emanuel Steward, rest in peace. When you got to meet him and speak with him and work with him, what were his thoughts? Because you were the very first female as a publicist and then a manager, especially in boxing. How did that, did he take to it or no?
Immediately. When I did the first interview with Tommy back in, like I said, 78, Emanuel was just thrilled with the results. And he said, well, can you do one on Mickey Goodwin, my other fighter? I said, of course I will. So I did an interview with him, then Milt McCrory, and then, Hilmer Kenty and all the other fighters that came along in the next 10 years as publicist. And he was so welcoming. He's the one that showed me how to wrap hands. Emanuel Steward's the one that showed me how to use, Avatine, different things to stop cuts and what you do and what to look for in a fighter. How can you tell when a guy comes in the gym if he's got that quality that's going to make him a champion, or if he's just a club fighter, which is good too, or if he's just an opponent. There's different levels in every business and in every sport. And he showed me what to look for. He was so open. He was such an amazing mentor that I consider that my 10 years under his tutelage, under his mentorship, was like college, graduate school, and a master's degree. I couldn't have learned from anybody better than Emanuel Steward. So it was a gift.
What was the first cut or first fighter you had to nurse a nasty cut for? And did it make you squeamish? Blood doesn't really gross me out, but I'm not anxious to touch it either. So what was that? Who was, if you remember which fighter, what it was?
Clearly. The first fight was Tommy fought for the title against Pepino Cuevas, and he got cut, and Manuel was busy. He had other fighters on the card. He said, please take Tommy to the ER and get him stitched up. And I went, me? And he said, yeah, you. I said, okay. So now I'm taking Tommy, young Tommy, 20 years old, 21, and he's got, his hand with the towel over his eye. And we go to the emergency room, which was just a couple miles from the arena. And we get in there and he takes off the towel and he's just this big gash. You could look in it. It was so wide open. You could see the white, like of the bone.
Oh,
and
my.
but I kept my cool because my thing was if I get upset, it make him upset. So I just put on my mommy hat and I went, oh, it's fine. It's not so bad. He said, what's it look like? I said, like a cut. I mean, it's going to be fine. He said, what are they going to do? I said, well, they're going to stitch it up. And he said, is it going to hurt? I said, I don't think so. They probably will give you something for the pain. So the doctor comes in with this needle and he's going to inject it, to freeze it. And Tommy's grabbing my hand. He's never had that before. And I said, no, just hold on to me, just squeeze hard if you need to. And he did. I mean, Tommy's strong. He grabbed onto me and the doctor injected it. And if you've ever seen a cut being stitched, when you inject it, it blows up a little bit bigger and it's leaking blood and it's like wide open. And I was fascinated. I watched how he actually stitches underneath the layers underneath to build it up. So he's stitching subcutaneously at the layers under the cut. And I was so fascinated that I wasn't grossed out by it. I was like learning something. So I watched how many layers deep it was, how they stitched it, how they closed it. The inside stitches were dissolvable. We had to go back in, I think, a week to remove the outside stitches. But I learned so much that day. And I was with him for so many cuts after that, many cuts with James Toney and other fighters. After that first time, never bothered me. I went with them to the ER and watched them stitch it up. And I was an old pro at it. And so it never bothered me after that first time.
Oh, I got a chill.
I know. I'm like, I could visually see it going underneath. I'm thinking because you would sew you would hem, and I'm like, oh, you would have to go under layers. Interesting.
No,
Well,
you have to build it up from the
Yeah.
inside out. If they just closed it at the top, it'd be open underneath and it gets hit again, it would pop right open. There would be nothing to support it. So I learned a lot. And I thought, okay, use that knowledge. And I used it with my own kids as they were growing up after that. And again, you can't be squeamish if you're in a sport like boxing. You have to just take it. And as a woman especially, you can't be a girly girl and go, oh no, look at the blood. Ooh. You just have to keep a stone face and say, okay, we'll take care of that. Let's go.
When you mentioned Tommy Hearns and for the world title, you were part of the Four Kings era. He was fighting, some of those fights against all four of them were the best fights. We still talk to it about it this day, and we will always talk about it forever and ever, our grandkids and whatnot. Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns, two of those fights, it was when you were negotiating those terms, did Tommy just say, give me whatever given whatever so we can make these fights happen? Because now everything's about negotiation, and you're one of the most skilled negotiators at the table from what I've heard. But back in those days, was it just easy to get those fights made?
Obviously not, because there was quite a few years between the first fight and the second fight. But the first fight was really interesting because at that time there were 15 rounds. And so had it been a 12-rounder like they are today, Tommy clearly would have won. But those bonus rounds, that 13th, 14th, 15th round is where it changed the course of everything, because that's when Tommy ended up losing. But had it been a 12-rounder like they are today, he was winning and would have won. But you can't look back. They changed it after that to 12-round fights, and which is a lot, I think, more humane for these guys not to go 15 rounds. And it's hard to believe that back in the day, they didn't have any limit on the rounds. They just went till somebody dropped, which was crazy. But the second fight with Ray and Tommy, Tommy won, but they called it a draw. But even Ray will tell you that Tommy beat him the second time. He just didn't actually get that win. But there was 9 fights total between Hearns, Leonard, Hagler, and Duran. I was at all of them, and they were just amazing fights, because at that time you had the best fighting the best. Nobody dodged anybody. Nobody said, oh, he's too tall, he's too short, oh, his record's too good, oh, he's a southpaw. I mean, today's fighters are very picky. I won't say that they've been pampered, but I would just say that they're very schooled on building a record. It's like, oh, somebody's O's got to go. It's like remaining undefeated is such a big thing. Whereas it used to be that the best fought the best. And if he had a loss or two, it wasn't the end of the world. A guy could be 25-0 against nobodies, and a guy could be 20-5 against top-notch fighters. And the guy 20-5 is going to easily beat the 25-0 guy who hasn't beaten anybody. But all of a sudden, we reached a point where when we were on the internet and you could easily access box racket records, everybody wanted to be undefeated. That was like a big thing. So you have fighters that are undefeated against lesser opposition and guys who might have a loss or two, but they fought major fighters. So you have to really look at who fought who to judge the quality of a fighter. You can't be fooled by a record.
As you say that, it makes me think of fighters like a Gabe Rosado, who has been in some really, really tough fights and has suffered a few losses, but he fights and he shows up. Now we're switching into an era now. There's been a lot of news recently about these best matchups heading to Saudi because there's money there and there's somebody willing to pay top dollar for the fights. Can that repair what's broken in boxing? Because so much gets hung up on sanctioning bodies and politics and networks and sponsorships and all these different things. Is that the key? Because also in your era, that was a time when fighting internationally was nothing. It was expected that fighters would travel and go other places. So can Saudi Arabia fix the ills that boxing has right now?
I think it could help. And I really think it's important to force fighters to fight the best, to be the best. And my fighter, Myquan Williams, who is 140 pounder that I have, he's 20-0 and 2 draws now. He just fought the other night. And he had to go in as the opponent. Even though he's undefeated, someone has to be the B side. And he went in and he fought a tough guy, Luis Feliciano, on Pro Box.
He won, yeah. He
And
won.
we went in as the opponent. And here's a guy that's, undefeated. You'd think he would be the A side, but they brought us in as the B side. And I took that risk because I know my fighter's that good. And he fought a guy 18-0. And I said, you know what? I don't care about records. I care about skill levels. I believe that my fighter could beat this guy. And I said, I'm taking the fight. And, when you come in as the B side, sometimes the other side has a better hotel, gets better this, better that. But it doesn't matter. If you know you can win, take the risk. And I was willing to fight somebody good in order to climb up the ladder. And he knocked him out. And so now, we're in a position for a bigger and better fight next time. So in order for boxing to get to the place you're talking about and what Saudi Arabia is doing is for managers to kind of push their fighters into a little bit riskier fights, but fights that will get them further up the ladder. You can fight lower class guys or guys who are laterally the same as you forever, and you're never going to get to a world title. So I think it's important to always increase the level of competition so that you have a competitive fight, not a one-sided fight. So yes, I'm hoping that that'll do it. I think that the Jake Pauls and the Logan Pauls that are bringing a lot of attention to our sport, some people think that's bad, but I think anything that brings focus to boxing is actually good and helpful. So I just want to see our sport get back to where it was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, because you girls missed some really fun times. And I think we can have those again if the sport gets back on its axis. So that's what I'm hoping for.
I don't know if you saw that interview recently on DAZN with Ade. He interviewed His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, and he said the same thing. He loves boxing. He doesn't want YouTuber fights in Saudi anymore because obviously they're putting up all the money. And he just wants the fights that they were back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, because that's when the best fought the best. They didn't care about who has more Instagram numbers or, stupid things. It's like, they just wanted to fight. And that's why I get it. They're putting up all the money. But Jeandra and I, we talked about it in a show yesterday that's dropping today, that yes, those are the big fights, the Joshuas, the, Wilders and whatnot, all the big names. But what happens to the people at the bottom, not at the bottom, it's say like top 10 and down in the rankings. Those guys will never get those big paydays unless they go take those big risks. So how does that work? Because how did, you know, I don't know, Jackie, since you're in boxing, how does that work with the sanctioning bodies? Because it seems like His Excellency is making all the rules now, and he determines who's going to fight who at this point.
Well, that's a really good point because it was very different back in the day. Like when James Toney fought Michael Nunn, you know, he fought him in his hometown, and that was in the early 90s. And everything was network TV. So people at home could just tune in for free. Wide World of Sports on Saturdays, you know, fights Friday night, USA. Everything was free. You could just turn on your TV and see boxing all the time. So you could build a fighter pretty quickly as far as, you know, national recognition. Now it's not even cable because Showtime and HBO are gone. So now you have all just streaming. And so it's a very different marketplace. It's so hard to build a fighter. And so the club level is packed with fighters, but the top level, like you said, it's just very, very thin up there at the top. And it's much harder now to build a fighter. Now, what you have to do, like Quan Williams, my fighter, just won one of the regional America WBA titles. So that will get him rated in the WBA, which will help get him up into the top 10. You have to go through at least a sanctioning body to get rated enough to fight for a title. If you're just floating around, and you could be a great fighter in Des Moines, Iowa, or Chicago, or Cleveland, but if you're not affiliated with a TV network, a top promoter, or an organization, you're just going to wallow in obscurity. It's just a whole different playing field. You brought up a really good point. So hard for a young fighter to get to the top today. Very difficult.
Mm-hmm. It's sad, really. It reminds me of like when like Walmart moves into a town and all the ma and pas get pushed out because now everybody can go to Walmart and get what they need. To go back a little bit to what you said about the maintaining the O and the records and taking riskier fights to prove your fighters not worthiness, but their skill and that they belong in the top. How can we interpret that as a lack of confidence in fighters? Because there's so much focus in keeping it O, and making sure we match make this kid to keep this O record to build this facade of who a fighter is, and then they get against a top guy and then they get totally wiped out. So is that road to that a lack of confidence in the fighter? Like, if I was a fighter, I'd be like, well, I think I'm tough. Put me in with a tougher challenge. Why do you keep putting me in with these guys? I feel like that makes them lose interest and the intensity they need for the sport if they're always being match made with a guy that they know they can beat easily.
That's such a great point. I can't even tell you how great a point that is, because that's what's going bad in the sport, is that you have managers and trainers that want to baby and protect their fighter because either they have a financial investment that they don't want to lose. Like, I've got thousands of dollars in this kid, I got to keep him unbeaten. Then they get him up to a certain point and he gets beaten because he didn't have the proper background. He didn't fight enough good fighters to know what he was doing when he got in with the top fighter. My philosophy after 45 years of trial and tribulation is I've learned that the best way to get all the way to the top is to climb that ladder one step at a time. So if you're not fighting a better guy today than you fought last time you fought, you're staying at that same level. The other fighter might be growing while you're staying here. If you can't fight this guy today and this guy tomorrow, maybe you fought a guy 15-3. Now you might be ready to fight a guy 18-0. And you have to look at their records. Like I told you, records are very, very tricky, because a guy 15-3 could be tougher than a guy 18-0. You have to look. Who did he fight? Was it a decision? Was it a knockout? Was it a split decision? Study it. These managers just go by a number. I don't know how much they look at videos. I don't know how much they really look at a record and go back. You go into the record and look at each fighter they fought and look at who they fought. It's not a quick thing. You look at a record, go, yeah, we'll take him. Study, look, make a game plan for a fighter, and absolutely take a step up each time if you're serious. But a lot of guys, like you said, they're afraid. And I don't know if it's that they don't have confidence in their fighter. They haven't tested the fighter enough to know if the fighter really is that good, because they've kept them, it's like handicapping them almost. They're stunting their growth by keeping them, I'll give you a bum, you can beat him. They knock out a guy that's 6-12. Oh, he's a champion. You know, maybe he's not, you know, and they jump on the ropes. Oh, this is the greatest thing ever. This kid's going to be a champion. You know what? Maybe the audience will buy that, but a guy was 6-12. If your guy didn't beat him, he's for sure going nowhere. So I think the more intelligent people in boxing know that the path to the top is by a better fight each time. Yes, have confidence in your fighter, but don't throw them to the dogs. Some people are the opposite. They have too much confidence. He can beat anybody. My kid will beat anybody. And they throw him in too soon. The kid gets beat. He loses confidence, and he's never the same. So managing a fighter is I won't say it's difficult, but you have to put a lot of thought into it. You have to decide if this is the right time, the right fighter, the right place, the right weight. Everything has to be just right. And I just think it's important to study the sport and really look into each match individually.
Sorry, Cynthia, one follow-up to that.
Oh, go ahead.
So are there too many do you think there are too many managers in boxing who have no boxing background? Because there's so many boxing managers out there who are cognizant of the financials, but they don't really know anything. You know, you got the matchmaking, you need all of these people, but should it be criteria for managers to have some sort of boxing background in addition to financial knowledge? Because someone can teach about your money. You can get anybody to teach about your money.
That's an interesting question. And I don't want to, say anything about any of the other managers out there. But I spent 10 years with Emanuel Steward before I ever managed my first fighter. I'm not saying anyone should have to do that. But you're right that there are quite a few managers out there who know zero about this. I mean, zero, nothing about the sport. They have money. They want to invest in a fighter. They go to a gym. They ask, who's a good fighter here? That kid's good. Come here, kid. I'm going to manage you. Here's $1,000 a month, whatever. They have no idea about properly matching. They don't know. They see it as a business, but they don't know the side of it, the sports side, the psychological side. And, I feel bad for the fighters that sign with that kind of a manager, because they might not be given the proper advice. But, you flash the money in front of a kid that doesn't have any, and it looks pretty appealing. So, I can't say anything negative about other managers, but I think that a young fighter deserves to have someone guiding their career that really knows what they're doing, because it really is a 4-lane highway. You have the fighter, the manager, the trainer, and if you're lucky, a promoter. And when you have all 4 of those lined up and everyone stays in their lane, it's a clear road to the top. But if the manager tries to train or the trainer tries to manage, all of those things, it just doesn't work.
I have a stupid question. It could be
There's
stupid,
no
maybe
stupid
not.
question.
What is the difference between a manager and an advisor? Because I thought the manager advises your fighter.
That's a great question.
I don't know.
And after 45 years, I can tell you, I don't know that there is a difference. Here's, in my experience, sometimes the advisor puts up money, and sometimes the manager puts up money and hires an advisor to tell him what to do with his money. So, basically an advisor, I think in the cases I've seen, the manager puts up the money, but he doesn't really know exactly what he's doing. So he brings in an advisor for a certain percentage. Like, I got this fighter, I got money in him, but I don't know, do we take this fight or we don't take this fight? So they bring an advisor in and he says, oh yeah, take that fight. Oh, here's 5%. I've never needed an advisor, but I think it's just another way to get money out of the fighter in some cases. And I think a young fighter should be very careful who he puts around him. I really do, because there's so many, I don't want to call them vultures, but there's a lot of opportunists, let's say, in this sport. And they see a young kid who doesn't really know anything about the business side. All he dreams of is being a champion. And someone comes in the gym with a few bucks in his pocket and says, "Hey, I'll handle you." And of course, it sounds great to him. And I've just seen so many bad examples of good fighters not getting where they could have gotten because they had bad management.
Very predatory, like ambulance chasing ambulance chasing lawyers.
Great
Yeah.
analogy. Great analogy.
Oh my God, there's so much we can talk about. But we have to kind of talk about the women with female boxing. Obviously, it wasn't really prevalent back then. Of course, Christy Martin, which I think you're opening. Did you partner with him?
Christy and I have been friends for over 30 years, 35 years. I knew her before she was even married. She's a doll. We're really good friends. I love Christy. But I've been involved. I was the commissioner for the International Female Boxing Association back in the late 90s. So when it started to get popular, I got involved. I started the whole pregnancy test thing because I was afraid this one girl looked like she might be pregnant. She wasn't sure. I said, well, we got to test it. And then I thought we probably should test all the girls because if you're in the first trimester and you don't know and you get hit in the stomach, it could be bad. And I made some amazing friends, Mia St. John and Yvonne Trevino and Bridget Riley, and some of the girls that were fighting 25 years ago who are still my friends. And I love the sport. I love the girls that are in it. And it's so great now that we see big paydays, main events at, Madison Square Garden with 2 women. So we've come a long way. And that means a world to me because I'm all about, obviously, glass ceilings and equality and that. And I think that to see the women like, Clarissa Shields getting up there, getting gold medals and making the big money, it's about time. Although I am a little, I'm so glad you brought this up because I'm a little conflicted about this, USA allowing transgender.
Thank you.
Can we talk about that, girl?
We can definitely, we can definitely talk
that.
about it. It's a very hot topic, and Jeandra and I have, we have our own opinions. My opinion is no. Make your own lane. I'm so sorry, but men and women are built differently. If a transgender man turned woman hits a biological woman, it's not the same. They hit harder. I'm sorry, but yeah, that's my thought. Jeandra, what's your thought on it?
I too am against it. I am very much an ally for LGBTQI community and equal rights. However, I think that sports is a place that it needs to be separated because here in reading some of the language that I read of the allowances and considerations for that, we already have a sport that's played with steroid use and all of these things. So what's to say that you're taking these steroid treatments or whatever the treatments are that you have to adhere to if you're a transgender woman to compete in the woman's side of the sport can also mask other things. And I would hate to see someone die because maybe the cycling isn't correct and the human body is not exact. No 2 bodies are made the same. So whatever cycle works for this fighter may not work for this fighter. And on the flip of that, are there a number of transgender men who are going over to fight on that side? And I feel like it's very, very specific to transgender women fighting natural born women and not the other way around. And that's very concerning to me. I know it's very controversial. It's not PC to be anti, but I'm wholly against it.
Completely.
Well, it's an interesting thing because what they're claiming is that in order for the transgendered person to compete, they must have several years of estrogen, they must have genital reassignment. And so at that point, they feel that they're, pretty much on a level playing field. But structurally, like you said, bone structure is something you cannot change.
Right.
So a big boned man might take estrogen and lower his testosterone, and he may cut off his male parts, but you don't get your strength from your penis anyway. So that isn't going to make much difference
Exactly.
with or without, right? So
Mhm.
I think it would be, and you definitely brought up a good point when you said, let them have their own lane, let them have their own league. Let's do, I don't know if there's enough of them to even start a league of transgendered fighters, but I don't mind a woman golfer or a woman tennis player. I mean, even though there's still that disparity in strength, this is a contact sport. This is
Yeah.
a little bit different,
Mhm.
and brought up the point of, I have a girlfriend that, transitioned to a guy, but I would hate to see her fight a guy at her same weight because
Mhm.
I just don't see, she's a guy now, but kind of a more of a frailer guy, not, like a buff, strong guy. And
Mhm.
so I'm not so sure that mixing the genders and the reassignments is going to be good for the sport. I think it's an accident waiting to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then everyone will say mea culpa after everything has happened, and you can't bring this person back in. Did I miss something? Is it only for boxing? Because I haven't seen any other Olympic sports have any other similar type of edicts, like track and
I
field
I
or anything like that.
I haven't either.
Swim.
We could search it, I'm sure, but none of them are as contact as boxing.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
if you're jumping over a fence and you're used to be a guy, that's one thing. Who are you hurting? But, and the swimmers, we know the swimmers are so much stronger. But when you're talking about getting punched by someone that used to be a guy, I think that's a different consideration. And
Absolutely.
I think we need to look at it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I think USA Boxing, I'm not sure where they got their research. How have they tested it on any, like there's no how did they come to this conclusion? I'm assuming it's all males that came to this conclusion. I'm sorry, but it just doesn't make sense. And that really broke boxing Twitter. And it's a really, really convoluted conversation to have, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. WBC stated that they are not allowing transgenders to fight female or versus a male because they realized how dangerous. There was a fight in Thailand not too long ago where I didn't see it. I heard about it, but the transgender just got beat really bad. Like, and that's when WBC said, no, we can't. It's just too dangerous. But
I'm
I
just
have some.
smiling listening to this because back in the era when boxing was great, like when we talked about the Four Kings, they would have just been in complete confusion if this subject came up. They would, what are you talking about? A girl who's now a boy who used to be a man, but now he's a woman. We had none of that back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even in the early 2000s. This is something that, boxing has never had to contend with. And that's just a sign of our times. I mean, it just sounds so weird to the old timers when you talk about a fight with a fighter that used to be another sex, now fighting in a different sex. It's just signs that we're living in a much different world.
I'm all in favor of a different category. I have some conspiracy theory ideas about it, but we'll have those over drinks. That's an
I
over
like that
cocktails
idea.
conversation.
so on the topic of females, since we did discuss the transgender, but now females, we have lots of these fights, but I still believe that a lot of them are being underpaid. Where now the issue of 10 rounds, 12 rounds, 3-minute rounds. I personally would love, just even for championship rounds, at least 12 rounds, 2 minutes. I think that's fair, but they still think it's dangerous, or some organizations. But other organizations are on board with it. Amanda Serrano has, championed it. She refuses to fight for belts if they're not 3-minute rounds. Good for her. She can make the choice. Jackie, your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think that, stamina wise and conditioning wise, I think the women and the men should be equal. I mean, if a woman can run as fast and as long as a man and bowl and golf and do everything else, where does it say that a woman can't go 3 minutes, but she can go 2 minutes? It sounds ridiculous even when you think about it. So if you're going to give equality to a woman in a sport, let her compete on a level playing field. If she can go 3 minutes, let her go 3 minutes. I just don't understand that. I think that it should be equal all the way down. I agree with you 100% on that. if a girl doesn't want to fight a 3-minute round, she can protest it and not do it, or say, I choose not to. But they want to. They've chosen to do that. So who's to tell them you can't go 3 minutes? What commissioner or what man is telling a woman you can't do that? Not
And
right.
even more ridiculous than that, I don't think there's any female fighter out there who's in the gym only training for 2 minutes at a time. When they're in camp, they're not training that way.
Yeah. The bell in the gym is a 3-minute bell because girls train with the guys, and they spar and do everything the same as the guys. 3 minutes. Now you're going to throw them in a fight and cut them to 2. It doesn't even make sense, because if you're sparring a 3-minute round, you have a minute to get ready, a middle, minute, and then your last minute to show what you got, or, and now you're chopping that in a real fight. It just doesn't make sense. It's not fair, and I don't like it.
Yeah, completely agree.
Actually, the first person that I managed was Bobby Hitz, who's now
Bobby Hitz. Yes. Yes.
He was my first fighter. He's a heavyweight. I love the guy. We were besties. He's still a really close friend of mine. And I signed him back in '88. And he was just a delight to work with. And it was while we were in the gym that we saw James Toney, who was looking for a manager. And I think he, saw this blonde woman that's with this big heavyweight and dressed him in really cute outfits, nice, clean looking. And I'm holding his legs while he's doing his sit-ups and wiping him down. And he goes, what the heck? He's being really pampered. How do I get that? So I think that once the guys got used to seeing me in the gym and they saw how well I got along with my fighter, they thought maybe that wouldn't be so bad to have a woman. And then I started getting matching outfits to them. They'd get in the ring in their satin outfit and I'd get a matching one, I think they thought it wasn't just a gimmick anymore. It was kind of fun, and I always would buy them stuff and bring them to my house, and we'd have parties and barbecues, and they became like part of my family. And I think for a lot of the kids who didn't have good home lives, and it was like being part of a loving group, and they embraced it. And before long, I had a whole stable of kids, and I proved that being a female manager is doable. At the beginning, Bobby Hitz got all the bad parts of it because he was the first one. And I remember some of the other heavyweights just saying, oh, what are you going to hide behind her skirt? Or, oh, tell her to hit us with her heel, and they made fun of him. And he was a great sport about it. But once James Toney joined, and then Kenny Gould and some of my other fighters, they didn't give me crap anymore.
I shook James Toney's hand once. His hands are so enormous. He has, that's all I can remember. Just, hi, I'm Jeandra. And just his hands just looking like, hi, nice to meet you, compared to my hands. Jeez.
Didn't he just fight?
He fought, was it Ray Product for an exhibition in Jamaica or somewhere. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I get it. I understand these old timers want to get back in the gym. I get it because of money and just the star power and just the fans because they miss it. But
that's a whole other subject, is these guys in their 50s and even I know a guy 61. He says, I could still do it. I want to get in. Would you get me a fight? And I'm going, oh no, honey. Your day came and went. You were wonderful. Live on those beautiful memories. Go polish your belt. But at 61, maybe it's better just be a fan.
For sure.
Is there a fighter that you wish, like a wish list of fighters that you would have managed? Or is there one specific fighter?
Well, I would have, it was a conflict, but I would have loved to have managed Sugar Ray Leonard. I love him as a person, and he had a wonderful career. I would have loved to work with Mike Tyson. All of the champions, because I love and respect them so much. And there's really not any one particular fighter that's like the one that got away, so to speak, because I've had such great relationships with so many of the fighters that I've admired and wanted to work with. And I'm still doing it. Mike Kwan's doing great. My kid Sam Rizzo's doing great. And I still get requests all the time from young boxers, male and female, looking for management. I only wish I had the time to take them all on, because it's a love of mine that I'm sure I'll take with me till I can no longer climb in the ring or do what I do, because I love it so much. And I can't really say, other than Ray, anyone that I say I really missed the boat. And I never had a chance because he already had management, but he was just a joy to work with. And, you can't beat a fighter that's a joy to work with, because, the sport itself is tough. And get a guy that's great like that. I had a guy, Bronco McCart, who is junior middleweight champion, and a doll to work with, the sweetest guy. And it makes it so worthwhile. It makes every day wonderful.
Have to
I agree. I
wrap.
love Ray Leonard too. I
I know
agree.
we all do. You are a fighter yourself in the sense that you beat heart disease and cancer. So we are so blessed that you are still here with us and sharing your journey with all the fighters that you are still managing. And the whole reason why you're on here is because you will be inducted in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. That is the pinnacle of where everyone would like to end up in their career once it's all said and done. When you got that call, what was the first word? What was the first thought?
My first thought was, what took you so long? But I didn't say. My first word was thank you. I'm really honored, and I'm just really excited about it. Grateful, very grateful to be recognized. And if I in any way could have paved the road for you girls and the other women that are in the sport today, that's my legacy. I want to know that I was able to go through a glass ceiling and pull up others behind me, because in so many industries and so many walks of life, a woman will get to the top and then pull that ladder up with her, saying, I'm here. I don't need these other bitches coming up behind me. And they go, I'm here, and, fight your own battles. And to me, I've always felt it's so important to reach out to the girls coming up and the women behind me. Come on, there's room at the top for all of us, and there's strength in numbers. And if I could do it, you can do it. And it's so rewarding for me every time another woman comes into the sport and says, yeah, I'm here, I did it, and thank you for opening the door, and can you help me? Oh my gosh, anything. What can I do? What advice do you need? Anything, because it just makes me feel so great to see all of you coming into this sport in different capacities. I love it. I was alone for a long time, and then little by little, more and more women got involved. And now, I'm just so happy.
We got to figure out how to make the trip out there. I want to go.
I know.
I
Yes.
was telling Christy Martin and some of the other girls, I said, I would like this to be the most female attended of all the Hall of Fame induction weekends. So there's power in numbers, and the girls are here to support each other. That would be really great to me, because I feel that we belong in the sport. We all have a place here, and you girls are doing great. And all the women that have come along in the last 45 years after me are doing wonderful jobs, making me so proud. And I'd love to see you guys there. That would be so great.
We all have to wear the same color so you can see us like a block.
Well,
so you have to tell us.
Do you know, Jackie, we were invited by the International Boxing Hall of Fame from Ed Brophy to vote on the panel for the females. And I, for one, you were one of my votes.
Me too.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so
We are
much.
electors.
Yeah.
To know who votes. They don't tell you. I don't know anything. I just know I was on the ballot, and then I got the call, and I was so happy. It's to be able to leave a legacy behind, to show any minority, a black and a white world, a girl and a man's world, anybody who feels that they're in any way involved in the isms, sexism, ageism, racism, all the little stereotypes that make people feel less than, or feel like that fish out of water where they don't belong. We don't need any of that, because we all do belong. It's about your skill level. It's about your intelligence in the area that you're going into. We all belong, and there should be no limitations based on anything other than your merit. Do I belong in this business, in this sport, in this era? If you do belong, you belong. And it shouldn't be based on anything but talent.
Beautiful words. Amen to that. And on that note, thank you again, Jackie. We appreciate you gracing us here.
I was looking forward to this all week. I said, oh my God, I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. But yes, okay, you guys. So if you want to go to the International Boxing Hall of Fame in Canastota, New York City, it's June 6th through the 9th. Get your tickets because it is all about the fans praising and just it's all about you, the inductees, and it's a great class of 2024. Congratulations again to the first lady of boxing and the first female boxing manager.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
to you.
I love the Hall of Fame and I hope there'll be a lot of people turning out for it because it's going to be an amazing weekend.
And if you are a corporate sponsor and an ally, please make your checks payable to the Best Women's Boxing Show, period. We do, in all seriousness, we would love to go out there and maybe take some young ladies with us to go support Jackie being inducted and all the other inductees. We would love that very, very much. So reach out to us and we want to wear all the same colors so Jackie can see us.
Oh my
When
God,
you
that'd
do
be
the
awesome.
parade.
And if there's any opportunity that weekend, I would love to do, I do a motivational speak that I do all over the place. My speech is, 45 minutes. It's a whole PowerPoint presentation. I'll do it there for free for any girls that come that want to, be inspired and motivated. I would love to do that. So if there's any opportunity, I gladly do it.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, on that note, Jackie, congratulations. And we can't wait to see you up there in Canastota getting your award. And on that note, thank you for opening the door for us.
Yes.
My pleasure. I love you girls and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. All right, guys, this is a great show. I can't say anything more, Jeandra. This was an excellent show with Miss Jackie Kallen. I'm Cynthia Conte.
And I'm Jeandra LaBeouf.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Best Women's Boxing Show, period.